You wake up, scroll through your phone, maybe grab a coffee. Standard morning, right? Now imagine this instead. Your breakfast is a chunk of stale bread dipped in wine. Your toilet is a bucket you dump in the street. And your idea of a fun afternoon is watching a fight to the death. Today, we're not just reading history books, we're living it. We're going to spend a day in ancient Rome and ancient Egypt to see whose daily life was the most brutal and who was actually way ahead of their time. By the end, we'll answer the big question: which ancient world would you really survive? Our day starts with the sun, not an alarm clock. In Rome, if you're a regular person, a plebeian, you're waking up in an insula. Think of a crowded, rickety apartment building that's a serious fire hazard. A morning shower? Forget it. There's no running water here. You have to go haul it from a public fountain. And your bathroom? That's a chamber pot. When it's full, you just toss the contents right out the window. While Rome was famous for its sewers, that system was mostly for the wealthy. For everyone else, the streets were a mess of garbage and waste. Breakfast, or ientaculum, is fast. It's usually just a piece of bread, maybe dipped in cheap wine to soften it up, with a glass of water. If you were having a good day, you might get some cheese or olives. Most Romans just grabbed their bread and ate on the way to work. Alright, let's rewind and wake up in ancient Egypt. As a farmer, you live in a simple house made of mud bricks with a thatched roof. High windows help let the heat out. It's not fancy, but it's your own space. Sanitation is still basic, but life revolves around the Nile, which is your source for washing and water. You'd start the day by washing up and saying a quick prayer to the gods for a good harvest. Breakfast here looks kind of similar, but with a twist. The main thing is still bread, maybe with some fruit. But the drink of choice isn't wine, it's beer. Beer was a staple for literally every social class in Egypt. So who wins the morning round? Rome has the chaotic energy of a big city, but it comes with filth, noise, and the very real risk of your apartment collapsing. Egypt is simpler and calmer, with a life built around the land and family. For comfort and basic hygiene, the point goes to Egypt. Breakfast is done, time for work. In both places, that means hard, physical labor from sunrise to sunset. In Rome, the city is just an explosion of noise. The streets are jammed with people, carts, and animals. If you're a craftsman, you're crammed in a small workshop all day. If you're a laborer, you might be hauling stone for one of the empire's giant building projects. Your workday was about 6 hours long, but it was tied to daylight, so summer days felt endless. And we have to talk about slavery. It was the engine of the Roman economy. Some estimates suggest around 1 in every 5 people was enslaved, doing the most brutal jobs in mines, fields, and homes. Now, let's step into the sandals of an Egyptian farmer. Your office is the rich black soil along the Nile, usually a short walk from home. Your entire life is dictated by the river's 3 seasons: Akit, the flood season, when you'd work on government projects like building temples; Perei, the growing season for plowing and planting; and Shemu, the harvest. Farming was a family job. Men would handle the heavy plowing with oxen, while women and children helped sow seeds. It was a life of constant work, fixing irrigation canals, weeding fields, and taking care of livestock. You'd use clever tools like the shaduf to lift water from the Nile into your fields. Most people were farmers, and they were the backbone of the entire civilization, feeding everybody from the pharaoh on down. So whose workday was tougher? The Roman worker had the stress and grime of the city, while the Egyptian farmer's life was relentless, backbreaking work. It's a close one, but the steady, predictable rhythm of Egyptian life, built around family and community, feels more stable than the chaotic, dog-eat-dog world of a Roman city. Point to Egypt. It's pretty clear that just surviving in the ancient world was a full-time job. If you're fascinated by what life was really like back then, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell for more deep dives into history. Because we're just getting to the good part. What did they do for fun? After a long day, how did people unwind? This is where Rome and Egypt get really different. For a Roman, the afternoon meant one thing: the baths, the thermae, were these huge, incredible public bathhouses, and for a tiny fee, anyone could get in. This wasn't just about getting clean, it was the social center of the city. You could work out, move between cold, warm, and hot pools, and spend hours just gossiping, making business deals, or relaxing. But Roman fun had a much darker side. The Colosseum and other amphitheaters were built for violent spectacle. Chariot races were insane and incredibly dangerous. And then there were the gladiator games, fights to the death between trained warriors or between people and terrifying animals, all for a roaring crowd. This was entertainment built on bloodshed, designed to keep the masses happy and distracted. Over in Egypt, free time was way more peaceful. Egyptians loved music and dancing, which were a huge part of parties and religious festivals. They were obsessed with board games, especially one called Senet. They loved it so much they were often buried with it so they could play in the afterlife. Sports were also popular, but they were more about skill than bloody spectacle. Think wrestling, archery, and throwing javelins. Families would go hunting and fishing together along the Nile. Rich nobles might throw huge parties, but for the average person, entertainment was about telling stories, playing games with family, and celebrating festivals that brought the whole community together. For this round, the choice is pretty obvious. The Roman baths feel surprisingly modern, but the state-sponsored violence of the games is just horrifying to us today. Egypt's focus on games, music, and community feels a lot more wholesome and, frankly, less terrifying. This round goes to Egypt, hands down. As the sun goes down, our day in the ancient world is ending. It's time for the main meal of the day, cena, in Rome, and time with the family. In a regular Roman home, dinner is simple. You'd sit on stools around a table and eat a thick porridge of vegetables or beans with bread. Meat was a rare luxury if you were poor. The family itself was ruled by the paterfamilias, the oldest male in the house. He had absolute legally backed power over his wife, his kids, and his slaves. For an Egyptian farmer, the evening meal is a welcome break. The family gathers to eat something similar to their other meals. Bread and beer are staples, maybe with a stew of lentils and onions. The diet wasn't super exciting, but it was nourishing. Family was the heart of Egyptian society, but the dynamic was totally different. It was still a patriarchal society, but women in Egypt had a level of freedom that would be unthinkable in other ancient cultures. They could own property, run businesses, and even divorce their husbands and get their share of the property back. Art from the time often shows husbands and wives as loving partners. The evening would be spent together, with elders telling stories before everyone turned in early for the next day's work. When you look at family life, Egypt seems way more modern. The legal rights and respect given to women are a world away from the absolute power of the Roman paterfamilias. For offering a more balanced and humane family life, the final point goes to Egypt. So, after a day in both worlds, where would you rather be? Let's look at the score. Rome gave us incredible engineering and bustling city life with amazing things like the public baths. But it was also a society built on slavery, filled with filth and danger for the average person, and entertained by bloody murder in the Colosseum. Egypt, on the other hand, was a life of hard farm labor, but it was stable, predictable, and centered on family and community. It was surprisingly progressive with women's rights and had much more peaceful ways of having fun. So which society was shockingly tough and which was unexpectedly modern? I'd argue the daily grind in Rome, with its constant threat of violence, disease, and chaos, was the tougher world to survive. But it was ancient Egypt, with its legal rights for women and focus on community, that feels surprisingly modern. While the glory of Rome is undeniable, if we're talking about day-to-day survival, the stability and humanity of ancient Egypt might have been the better bet. But what do you think? Which civilization would you have lasted a day in? Let us know down in the comments.